All right, real quick. Again, I know I said this too many times, but I'm just tired of explaining it. Later on in the class, most students consider this class to have the highest workload. It really prepares you for work experience. Please stay on top of everything. Bash for Windows. Have any of y'all installed this before? Bash on a or it's really Bash on Ubuntu on Windows. Okay, yeah. Windows 10 with Creators Update. Excuse me, 1703. Hopefully y'all have that. That one's fairly old now. You'll need to install Bash for Windows. I think you just go to the Microsoft Store, hit do it, and then it should tell you, it either installs it or says, hey, look, you need to enable something. Go Google how you enable that, and then go enable it, reboot your machine, because Windows loves to reboot. Install Bash, reboot your machine, then you can actually load it up. You can log in with your standard csci login to these machines if anyone's created that, but most of us probably have our own laptops, I'm assuming. Yeah. All right, great. Good. So terminal is a text-only window or in a GUI that emulates a console. So, boom. Hey, look at the terminal. All right. Yes, I know my terminal window has no borders. Borders drive me nuts. That's just me. But your terminal can definitely have a border to it. That's okay. I get it. That's where we have our CLI or command line interface, Xterm, Gterminal, LXterm. You can use whatever one you want. Any of us not used Git before? Great. It's going to be the same thing as an OOP. You need to fork the repo because you only have read access to mine. Then I will have read and write access to yours, and I'll be able to download and hook everything up. Let's see, blah, blah. Okay, create the account. For those online that don't have one, create your GitHub account, email me your username, email it here. You'll eventually receive an email to join CSU. Click link and join. Click on this repository, click fork. Now clone your repository. By the way, I found out over the summer, GitHub decided to enforce keys, security keys, meaning you may no longer authenticate using username and password. So I do recommend, if you haven't set up a key on your machine before, to go ahead and set up either a private, what's it called? I forget what they call it, personal token. There's personal token. I just use SSH keys because that's what I'm used to, or whatever. They got plenty of options, but you can no longer do a username and password. At least they understand username and passwords are broken. Oh yes, the autograder. What did y'all took OOP from Henderson? Is that right? What was her autograder? I think she changed it. Was it a website autograder, or did it come back as text inside of your GitHub repository?
It was a website.
It was a website. Okay. Yeah. So she did change it. So this autograder, the way it works is when it's hooked up. By the way, the first 5 or 6 labs don't have an autograder, but when we do have an autograder, you're going to hook it up. It'll function well. The one that used to exist in OOP, but no longer does. What it does basically is it takes your code, runs a test, and gives you commits a text file back to your repository, so you can look on it on GitHub or just do a git pull, and it should eventually come. And it'll tell you your grade based on which test you passed. Now, in Henderson's, I believe it probably told you what the test was, what the inputs were, and what the outputs were of what you were supposed to get and what your code actually got. I'm assuming that's what happened. Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. That's not going to happen. It's not going to say what test cases you failed. It'll not mention if there's a timeout. It'll just give you a 0 for that section. It will not say if there's compilation errors. Well, sometimes it does, but usually not. It may tell you which part of the lab you got right or wrong. Okay, I know this comes off as very strict, but the point is you need to start writing your own test cases and being able to diagnose or test your own code. The autograder is here to give you quick feedback so that you know whether you did the lab correctly or not. It is not here to handhold you and walk you through what you did wrong and what you need to do instead. Because if you actually think about it, if the test cases gave you the inputs, you could just write a program that just gets an input and outputs the output, and you're done. That's not what the point is of this course. I do not hand out the test cases from the autograder. It's imperative that you learn how to write your own test cases. Never semester I get the same thing. Dr. West, I don't get it. My program's working perfectly, but I'm getting a 0 from the autograder. Right. Sure it is. The grade from the autograder should be pushed to your repository after your submission. These test cases have been tested a lot. They should be pretty solid. If you have some issues, a lot of times it's either you didn't write certain functions, you didn't code it correctly, or there's an infinite loop somewhere in your code that you haven't detected. That's what happens if the autograder just says 0 and doesn't give you anything else. If it gives you like you got 0 on this part, this part, and this part, then your code's compiling, it's running, it's not timing out. But if it just says 0, it timed out. Okay. Any other questions before we go on to the material?